Hello everyone and welcome to today's CreepyPasta video. So, as you can probably tell by the title, this CreepyPasta that we're going to be discussing today is called Freddy Butcher. And this one's actually translated from Spanish to English, so it's originally a Spanish CreepyPasta. So, it sounds like quite an interesting one. Like I try to do on this channel, I don't read it fully. I have a quick skim read just to make sure I get a general gist of it, but I don't actually fully read it before covering it on my channel if I can help it. Obviously it's a bit difficult if it's one that I've read previously, but it'll be something that I haven't read for a while, because I started doing this channel really when I started to get back into creepypasta and all that lovely sort of stuff, because it is something that I used to be really into. Then it kind of, when I started working and whatever, I didn't have as much time to read creepypastas. It never disappeared, but it wasn't as much. But now I was getting back into creepypasta, so it's been refreshing to reread ones that I knew about before, and I knew general story, and to find new ones. So without further ado, let's get crack-a-lacking. So, Freddy Butcher. They never wanted him, they couldn't accept him, and still they let him do as he liked. It was like a bad dream, a nightmare. Frederick Neil Thompson was born on 17th of September 1986 in Aberdeen, Great Britain. His parents, Claire and Gary Thompson, never wished for a child. They were too poor to afford one, and already had to battle for their existence. Therefore, little Frederick was left behind in a clinic, all alone, screaming for love and a caring family. But he was not the only one. There were more than plenty of other kids searching for their mothers. Now he was one of them. It did not take long, and the parish family, a parental couple and their 9-year-old daughter, adopted the boy to help the forsaken child in Aberdeen a little bit. They chose their new family member fast and took him home without changing his given name. He was still called Fredward. The Parishes were a deeply religious family and attended to the Catholic believing. Mr. Parish worked as a butcher near the house, and besides their little daughter, he was the only one who earned some money. Sarah was a smart and very decent young lady, but she had to work as well, even though she was only 8 years old at the time. She knew her craft as a seamstress professionally, and with the church's help she donated the sewn clothes to the poor orphans. The money she got was not for the textiles, but for her hard work instead. The mother, however, was devils incarnate. She was addicted to pills and alcohol and had a split personality, which caused the family lots of trouble. She was incapable of loving and showing empathy, and she was a shabby woman that didn't care about herself anymore. She often suffered under bad temper tantrums, and it sometimes happened that she hit or aimed a knife at her husband and daughter, if not torturing them with the threat to kill herself. But since they had adopted Fredward, it seemed as if she just couldn't control her conditions, and it got worse. She ought to be put into a clinic. It never happened. She should get healed. Nobody cared. She had to get stopped. Nobody did it. When Freddy got older, he had to experience her abuse too. But no one protected the little parish, not his father, not his sister. He got beaten up whenever he spilled the tea, whenever he got up late, whenever he cried, whenever he was too loud. No one protected him. Why did no one save him? He wanted to know why. Little Freddy asked, his whole face battered and densely covered in bruises. However, the hardest time was yet to come, when it got even tighter and the hunger was immeasurable. At that moment, Freddy was 8 years old enough to support the family. Mr. Parish took the boy to the butchery, and it didn't take long for Freddy to realise that the raw meat was repulsive to him. The meat smelled, the sight of blood and open carcasses were planted in his mind, and he couldn't stand it. He had to cut the meat, touch it and gut the animals, but his nerves just couldn't bear it. "You've got to go on. Don't stop, Freddy," heard his father repeatedly say, quietly and without looking at him, because he suffered under paranoia that his wife might be watching him. Every time the boy ran out of the butchery with tears in his eyes, his mother hit and rebuked him for his weakness. As a matter of fact, Freddy was weak, and he got weaker, timider, and on he had to work at his father's so long as he lost his sanity. His glances frequently wandered to the window in order to avoid the sight of deaf animals, and on some days he noticed that strangers visited their house. He didn't know why, and often looked to his father, but because of his fear of being watched, his father kept silent and left Freddy in the dark. As time went by, Freddy's teeth needed a brace, and Luther and Sarah's last savings were used to buy him an enormous one. It looked like a frame that reached around his head, and two sharp wires pulled his cheeks apart. A metal plate was placed on his chin, and from there two wires pulled his lower lip downwards. He lost his ability to laugh and close his mouth, and even talking was a struggle now. Bullying began in school. The other kids taunted Freddy because of his braces and his worsening teeth, and they always called him names. Nobody would dare to sit next to him in class, but he was a very smart student. He knew a lot, but had not the courage to raise his hand because the others would call him a smart-ass. Because of his knowledge, he got punished. This was the system, and Freddy didn't understand, yet he didn't try to defend himself. The others who bullied him for his glasses and often brought them into pieces. Without his spectacles, Freddy was as blind as a bat. At some days, they even followed him home where he just got help from his elder sister. She was the only one who embraced and comforted him. When Freddy turned 11, a sudden affection, you could almost call love, towards Sarah awoke. However, that was and stayed unrequited. Sarah was gorgeous. She was intelligent and caring, and she cared for Freddy every time he was wounded and comforted him every time he was sad. Increasingly, he lingered after her heart's love. She was more than just an older sister to him, and he loved her more than that. He made the presents listen to what she was saying, but he was too weak to confess his love. Sarah wasn't oblivious to his growing feelings, and she desperately tried to think of him as her younger brother, and not related admirer. Every time she had a boyfriend, Freddy fell into a rage out of jealousy, which chased her father away from him and made the young boy even sadder. "Look at me," said Freddy. "Look at me! Look at me!" Freddy screamed over and over again. He lusted after Sarah's face, and he never got tired of looking at her. On the other hand, Sarah avoided her little brother. He began to live in a world of his own, an imaginary world in which he could see her wonderfully beautiful face whenever he wished, a world in which she looked at him and smiled and said, "I love you." Well, this is never a good sign in creepypasta, is it, when they start projecting reality and make up their own world? Oh dear me. Right, let's carry on. Utopian thoughts haunted his mind, and Freddy withdrew ever more in his imaginary world. One day the kids weren't home. The mother's problems paid back. Mrs. Parrish was ever so often absent for days. After that she was back home for a long time, haggardly locked up inside of her room. "Mother?" Freddy heard his beloved sister knocking. She knocked at the door, looked through the keyhole, and flinched every time she suddenly saw her mother's eye at the other side. It looked horrible, blood-lined and fluttering. "Get lost," she said every time. She was always talked about something about a payoff, a contribution being paid, but breaking off immediately. Sarah didn't worry much, thinking it was just another part of her mother's irrational thoughts. As unremarkable as these warnings were, the payoff were fatal. Their neighbourhood was not the safest. You would always hear stories about going murderers who, crazy in the head, and had fun seeing their victims suffer in the most terrible way you could think of. Some day, late at night, when Freddy arrived home, he noticed that the front door stood open, unusual because his mother couldn't stand to be vulnerable. He entered the house and called for his parents. "Mother? Father?" Silence. No one answered him. He walked back through the rooms and searched for them quietly, but also tensely, yet nobody was visible. He listened carefully. Someone was definitely there. He looked through the door crack inside of his mother's room, right into the sparkling eyes of a man, big, bloody, with knives in his hands. Freddy trembled in every limb and stood frozen by the time the man walked towards him. "You're that bitch's son, aren't you? And that butcher's, the last one left to close the circle." The man seized him by his collar and dragged him into the room. Freddy closed his eyes, terrified that he would see terrific things. He got tossed on the ground, his body and limbs ached. "Here," he heard the man saying. His voice was rough, and Freddy got scared. Nonetheless, Freddy dared to open his eyes and noticed that the man was wearing a mask. Then he saw his finger pointing behind the young boy to a kettle nearby, as big as Freddy. It is filled with a reddish brown liquid. You have to eat all of that to get out of here, or do you want to wait for help? He said with a lowered voice, pointing to where his father's butchery was. No, Freddy instantly thought, as far as you could call his mental figure thoughts. Anything but there. He would rather do anything that man told him than entering the butchery. Freddy rose up, shivering, and walked to the kettle, the small piercing through marrow and bone. Without hesitation, he began to eat the brew, which tasted utterly disgusting, but in some kind of way the taste pleased Freddy. He didn't know what it was and didn't worry about it too much. He picked up the scent of iron, and it didn't take long until they couldn't take it anymore. He wanted to go on, but it was impossible. His stomach hurt, his gums felt oddly, and the taste that was left in his mouth let him shudder. He was sick, yet he felt a hand grabbing the back of his neck and pushing his head into the shrill. He could no longer breathe, and his complete head was covered by that gross smell. The man pushed the boy's head many times and awfully long into the brew, but just before he lost his breath, the man lifted his head and asked Freddy, "Do you hate her so much?" "Her?" Freddy whimpered absently, a fake expression appearing on his face. And he continued eating. He was eating against his will, as well as to satisfy himself. It appeared to him more and more suspicious, and he felt weird things, almost like fingers or slimy eyes in the sludge. He felt the man's gaze upon himself, and when Freddy stopped, taking that object out of his mouth and looking at it, he wished it was just a bad dream. His eyes widened, and he heard the sound of the man's laugh from a distance. First quietly chuckling, then louder and crazier. His ears were ringing, and he began to breathe hysterically. "Do you hate your parents so much you have to eat them?" Freddy stared at his hands. He could no longer breathe normally, and a cold shiver ran through him. "It has to be a bad dream," he whispered, and trembled. "Mother and father and Sarah, his beloved Sarah, a bad dream," he screamed and grimaced. He had eaten his whole family, his mother, his father, and his adored sister. I was not expecting that, to be completely honest. "Your mother had to pay us. The payment was you all. You, your daddy, the other child, and that nasty woman. She gave your life as her payment." He laughed. "How dumb and naive, but I wouldn't have expected anything else." Freddy began to scream tearfully, yet he had no strength to say a word, and tried to stand up, but his legs were trembling too hard. Again the hand grabbed the back of his neck and pulled him out of the room. It was very dark, and in that ungodly hour no one dared to take a step out. Nobody saw how Freddy was dragged across the street, and if someone did see him from a safe distance, they saw the holes behind the curtains. They did as though nothing had ever happened. The man laid his hand on Freddy's mouth to silence him. The boy was powerless and vague. Realised that he was being dragged towards the butchery. No, Freddy was thinking again. Anything but that. His worst nightmare has come true. The fear was hurting his heart. It felt awful. It was lonely and cold, and he cried when he was dragged inside the building. The white tiles, the smell of raw meat, and the gory sight of the blood and knives his father had used this morning made him sick. "No, please let me go. I don't want to," Freddy screamed, clinging onto the man's arm. A dream. Freddy tried to believe in his own words as he was thrown into another room. It was the place Freddy feared the most in the butchery, the storage room, or the skinned animals were hanging from the ceiling. The room was long and had a disgusting stench. Freddy looked at the door and ran, because the man was closing it, but he was too late. He pressed his giddy body against the door, hammered at it, screamed as loud as he was capable of, and he hit his head against a massive iron. In his delirious state, the pain and his screaming didn't go. It took 10 minutes for him to lose his strength, his voice, his willpower, and lastly, his sanity. I mean, I can't blame him for that one. I think anyone in that situation would lose their sanity. He was sitting near the door and hugged his legs tight to him. Another whimper left his mouth as he was swinging left to right alone in his worst nightmare. He wanted to wake up. He didn't scream, he only whispered. "Mother," he whispered. Mother, he cried. Mother, he said. Mother, he cursed. He grimaced and raised his eyes. Mother. What's mother? Why is the horrible woman that criticised me so long? Was it the woman I saw in that broth, or the woman they spoke of every time in church? What was her name? Mary? Mary? Mary, Mother of Grace? His thoughts became lighter. He looked down at himself. His entire skin was covered with blood, as well as his fair hair and his clothes. Then he looked up and observed the tiles. Blood everywhere. His parents had to be executed here. Blood flowed down the walls. The red liquid was splattered on the white tables, red on white. Beautiful. Her speckles dripped from the white, and some even dropped onto him. He stood up despite his powerless legs and walked to a small mirror on the opposite wall. He looked at himself. There was blood in his hair, some red on his pale face. Freddy first touched his cheek, then his mouth, and went down to his neck. He blinked and rubbed his eyes. His lower lip trembled. His vision had gone blurred, but he couldn't avert his gaze. I am so beautiful. It was just a dream. Everything up until now was a fragment of his imagination. Nothing had happened. Nothing had changed. His vision blurred again, and from elation, Freddy had to smile. He saw it, the white. It was brightly, and it was merely a dream. Maybe everything his parents had told him was true. Jesus would take over their sins. Freddy would get to go to heaven. All the time he had refused to understand it, yet it was a wonderful concept. But it wasn't Jesus that stretched out his hand. It wasn't his mother, Mary, and neither God. It was a nurse asking Freddy, "How do you feel?" That wasn't the light Freddy had anticipated. "Jesus, Mary, what's wrong with you?" he whined with a voice that couldn't be broken more. His mind told him the answer. They hate you, they ignore you, they let you suffer and don't save you. That's exactly what you've never done before, he giggled. "Darling, I'm hungry." The nurse ignored Freddy's contextless sentences because in fact he shouldn't be able to feel hunger, thanks to the amount of medication he got. The doctors left the patient's room, and Freddy sat up. His arms were connected to some kind of appliance which made loud sounds. Moreover, he also felt an unpleasant tremor in his chest. His heart was beating so fast that his chest was vibrating and felt awful. He looked around and noticed that his room was completely white. He smiled, everything showing pearly white. It was wonderful. And what's more beautiful than pearly white, yet blood red on star white? Freddy slightly tilted forward and loosened the cables from his body. He got out of his bed and toddled to the door. He would return here and make sure that this place would be beautiful. Freddy sensed some appetite. Not just appetite he felt when he was in school and wanted to go back home, or when he was on the move for a long time. Not appetite for his father's lunch, fruits or sweets. Appetite for the grotesque and disgusting taste of human. He smiled sheepishly and convulsed his face distastefully at the same time. The taste was at the tip of his tongue, and wondering if it was disgusting or good. He laughed. He had to figure it out and left the hospital. "I have to go home to my dear mother." Freddy's thoughts got lighter, and the memory that his parents got eaten recently by him was now repressed into the depths of his mind. They were waiting for him at home. His work in the butchery was waiting for him. His beloved sister was waiting for him. The dentist was waiting for him too. His teeth were aching more and more, and his braces painfully pierced into his gums. Other than the scent, taste, and sight of meat, the dentist scared Freddy the most. But to still his hunger and ease the pain, he entered the white-tiled office which delighted his senses. "Dr. Reedus," Freddy read on the sign at the front desk, and immediately he felt a big hand on his shoulder. "We have been eagerly awaiting your arrival," said the tall man behind him. His greasy hair fell into his eyes, which were hidden by massive glasses. A surgical mask hid his mouth. Before Freddy could answer, Dr. Reedus and his two doctors led him to another room with a dentist chair. Of course, Freddy was more than pleased with the white colour, but before he was able to think more about it, the firm hand from a moment ago was on his neck again. He was dragged towards the chair. The bright, even celestial light of the lamp shone directly onto his face, and he narrowed his eyes to slits so he could see so he could see with the huge glasses and mask-covered faces. He smiled. Everything was white as the grinding machine that was inserted into his mouth. No anesthesia, no words, no mercy. A metallic retainer was plugged into his mouth, with the result that he lost his ability to close his mouth. Clamped and fixed, he couldn't move, and even if nothing would have changed, they put their hands in and detached his braces in silence. A sudden intense pain burst through Freddy's body. He screamed and fiercely struggled. "No, stop it," Freddy uttered with a half-opened mouth. His eyes were wide open, unable to lower his voice. Everything was so loud in his ears, filled with pain, it hurt like hell. Nobody seemed to hear his pleading, although the doctor and nurses were in the same room. That was when Freddy finally realised he didn't go to a normal dentist. It was as if this place was created to torture people and cast out their humanity like demons and ghosts. The dentist continued and kept going on with their diabolic work, and Freddy's screams got louder and louder. It felt like ages and was filled with grotesque agonies were passing when the pain came to an end, and yet merely a few minutes were over. The first tooth was finished. It was the next tooth's turn to get sharpened, and another wave of pain flooded his body. His teeth were heating up, and bit by bit he lost control. His field of vision got blurry, and then he passed out. He doesn't really attack, but the music is so loud. They brought him back to hell. The pain was unbearable and stinging. He couldn't sleep. It went on like that. He would lose his consciousness because of the pain and exhaustion, but open his eyes moments later. By every minute his mind turned more desperate, angrier and crazier. Freddy struggled and fought back. He snatched away his head from one side to the other until he suddenly felt a pang on his right cheek. At that very moment he saw what a vast amount of blood spurted on the doctor's faces. Freddy felt something flowing down his cheek, on his mouth, dripping on his chest. It was warm and tasted like iron. The doctor had slashed his cheek, and warm blood was running from the lung cut. Freddy's aim let him wake up from his nightmare. His aim for what he did all of this. The red in their faces, the red colour and the white, made Freddy cry, not only because of his pain, his desperation, but the dizzying beauty. He stared at their pale grimaces, wide-eyed, and waited. He forced himself to bear the pain until he finished his work. Nothing else remained to be done. Pain made one strong and would spur human into actions that seemed impossible. Freddy wasn't very powerful. He barely had muscles on his arms. His arms were thin, but it was that one moment of carelessness in which Dr. Reedus leaned forward and Freddy pushed himself up, clashing his teeth into the doctor's throat. He didn't bite off, but rather waited till the nurse's hit on his head hurt too much. Then he bit off as forcefully as he could and brutally tore off quite a big piece of the flesh, swallowing it. Yes, he had completely forgotten how good and unanimously horrible it was. He didn't even chew it, and thereafter greedily licked over his lips. The doctor tipped and slowly breathed his last breath. Despite the strokes and attempts to stop Freddy, the boy bore his teeth into the lifeless corpse a second time, and he was grinning all over his face. The nurses tried to restrain Freddy from eating him and drew the corpse away from him. "He is crazy," Freddy heard them saying, and fell back into his cot. They took out the corpse and closed the door after him, leaving Freddy alone in his room. He licked over his new teeth and grinned. The laughing got louder and clearer until he closed his eyes. The next hospital wasn't far. They must have known the doctor's office and had been looking for Freddy. He slowly opened his eyes and saw what looked like the most white. Once more he was in the hospital, and he heard the doctor's voices in front of the room. That was not a normal office. The surgeon, which fell victim to the boy, was a former madhouse inmate. The police hunted for Reedus for a long time now. Which fell victim to the boy, Freddy asked himself, because he had no memories from the incident. All left was that weird taste in his mouth, but his stomach felt empty. That unpleasant feeling somehow was unfamiliar. As he looked at the doctors, he saw something else. That than before in them. They were dressed so beautiful and white, just like himself. Freddy looked into the mirror hanging on the wall and couldn't recognise his reflection. His skin was pale and his hair was a fair blonde, but it could be even brighter, whiter and more lucent. He gradually got up and looked down on his body and enjoyed as he once again saw a white patient gown. He forgot the many cables in his body when he walked from his bed to the table, and they fell on the ground. Freddy's back hurt as he straightened himself, so he decided to walk bent. He brought his right hand to his left breast and listened. His heartbeat was very irregular and it didn't normalise. He didn't think much about it and he left the room. "Oh, Holy Mother Mary, what should I do now?" Freddy whispered and grinned. His legs were trembling and felt boldness. He lurched slightly, steadying himself on the wall to at least stay straight. Yes, he would come back here and arrange his new home as he wants to. "Excuse me, boy, you shouldn't walk yet. We still need to." "I shouldn't go," Freddy hissed and grabbed Doctor's neck, "but I want to walk." The man lifted his hands defensively forth and nodded. He watched as Freddy lurched outside without balance and without a destination. But he would find one, because his stomach, which now had become his heart, rumbled loudly and asked for food. "Mary, where are you? Did you save me?" That question would not leave his mind. Did God and Holy Mother Mary save his life? The constantly returning lights, but hadn't they shown up to betray him? Yet Freddy thought and lifted his head. You were never there for me. Therefore, why would you help me now?" As the nagging hunger grew bigger, he clenched his terribly feeling tummy. Eating someone would be okay, and anyone else would do the same, right? A shiver ran down his spine as he felt a hand skimming the back of his neck. "Hey, young boy, why are you walking around all by yourself?" Freddy turned around and faced the man with golden hair and green eyes. He looked friendly when he smiled at Freddy, and then winked his wife to come near them. "Darling, look at him. He wanders around the street for no reason, and he looks unkempt." Her big eyes sized up Freddy and wondered to bottom while her husband told her the story. "My God, the poor boy. Why do you do that?" she said caringly and embraced him. Her warm, still strange hug let Freddy's body stiffen a bit. "Where were your parents?" Freddy said. "Nothing." "Are you alone?" Freddy remained silent. "Where do you live?" He shrugged and cracked a smile. "Honey, I think the boy lost his memories. We should take him home with us. What do you think?" The woman nodded hastily and took Freddy's hand, leading him to his new home. The nice couple cared for Freddy. They gave him clothing, food and a nice place to live. He was completely ignorant of the way they loved him. He barely knew that much feelings. It felt familiar, but maybe it was just his imagination. They talked a lot with Freddy, told him about the 2 kids they once had, but were forced to give away, and that Freddy somewhat resembled them. He was awash with so much love. They accepted him as he was. They never asked him about his sharp teeth or his odd wishes, for example, to bleach his hair or to avoid the sun and wanting to go out by himself. "You're like a son to us, my boy." 3 years had now passed since Freddy came into the family. 3 years had passed since he escaped the hospital and found a new home. They were a pitch-perfect family. I didn't start caring about him, but Freddy hadn't forgotten anything. He secretly sneaked out, and sometimes he came home smeared in blood. That was when he told his family that a dog had attacked him, he had been shot, or that he had injured himself while climbing. But no matter how much he ate, he never felt satisfied. He would eat a person, mostly a small one like a child, but the sensation of hunger wouldn't fade. Therefore he would eat so much that his stomach hurt, and every time he felt the pain, fragments of his memories appeared in his mind, but he wasn't able to put them together. He ignored the pictures and kept eating the food his family gave him. Freddy didn't like animals' meat, and vegetarian products wouldn't satisfy him. Yet he wasn't able to leave the house every day. He couldn't go on like this, and he tried to scrap the idea eating his parents. His parents were actually perfect. He didn't know if he loved them. He knew that the hunger grew bigger and bigger. It was a day like any other since the 3 years. Freddy's father came back home from work, opened the door and stepped into the living room, his mouth wide open. His wife, barely in one piece, lay on the bloody ground. Arms and legs were already devoured. Her gut was cut open and the face didn't exist anymore. She was coated in bright red blood and numerous slashes were seen across Freddy's white clothes. He got up and stared at his father. He simply stared at him. The older man dropped his bag and froze, speechless with fear. The boy that he once had raised as his very own son had devoured his wife and was now looking at him the same way. He looked like he was hungry. Freddy advanced a foot. His father stood still. Freddy moved the next one forward, and his father didn't even blink with his eyes. He froze on the spot. Freddy stood directly in front of him and stared at him with glistening eyes. His father opened his eyes wide when he saw Freddy smiling, showing his bloody mouth and teeth. The boy laid both his arms around his father's neck, embracing him in a soft hug, and smiled. "I love you, father." "You're not my son," the older whispered. He whispered, but he didn't resist. His body was stiff in Freddy's arms, and he could hear Freddy's heavy breathing. The boy wouldn't release his father. "Why? Why aren't you a normal child? Why haven't you been like the other children?" he said, calm and sad. His voice was trembling, and Freddy sensed that he didn't want to hug him, but he's far too weak to break free. "I am like the others. I love you with all my heart, and so that you stay with me forever." He left the rest unsaid. It did not have to go on for his father to pick out the hidden message, the sentence of death. He wanted the hunger to leave. Maybe when he ate his father, it would fade, and both mother and father would remain with him forever. It was a grotesque logic, but Freddy didn't realise. You're no longer human. You are different, a monster," the father calmly whispered. Freddy said nothing for a while and looked past his parents' head. With a cheery voice he told him, "I respect that the mind needs the body. Because of that I do all of this. I get orders and wishes I hear in my head, and I like them. The voices tell me how to satisfy my past hunger, which is all I want." His father grinded his teeth due to the boiling anger inside him when he heard Freddy's words, which made no sense to him. What he was saying were the orders from voices inside his head. The old man was sobbing. "You will burn in hell, I swear in the eyes of God." "Swear before me," Freddy said, and brought his teeth close to his father's neck, where the carotid artery was located. He didn't cry or struggle when Freddy bit into his neck slowly. The procedure was finished fast. First, Freddy devoured his neck. Next was his limbs. After that, he ate his father's belly, and last was his face. The taste was amazing and dreadful at the same time. He suddenly noticed a hard object between his teeth and took it out of his mouth. It was a piece of an ID card. "Sit on top of the corpse." He looked closely at the card and studied it. "Gary Thompson," he read. "Gary Thompson. Gary Thompson." The name sounded kind of familiar with him, and immediately he knew where from. "Gary and Claire Thompson," Freddy whispered. Gary and Claire Thompson, his biological parents. Now everything came back into his mind. He grew up in a foster family with his beloved sister Sarah and his parents Luther and Lois Parrish, who he ate 3 years before. Freddy stood up and held onto the ID with shaking hands. He bent over as if he was cold instead. Instead he felt the heat burning through his body. While working in the butchery, his foster father had told him that his real parents lived nearby and had put him up for adoption when Freddy was just a baby. And now he had eaten his family for the second time, but this once it was on his own blood. No, this was a bad dream, Freddy cried out, his voice shaking. He backed away from the corpses and leaned to the wall. His whole body was trembling. No, he screamed and fell to the ground with wobbly knees. His body wouldn't stop shaking, and a terrible pressure hurt his stomach. He clutched his belly, suddenly feeling sick. He took on his blood smear glasses and supported himself with one hand against the ground. He threw up, he vomited everything he had devoured the past few hours. It was so much, and in the beautiful colour of red. He looked at his parents' remains, his own blood, and his own eyes began to tear. In one case, because it hurt like hell, and he felt the urge to gag again inside his entire body. In the other, he felt the fear and pain of all the things he had done in the past. He was given 2 chances in life to live with a family, beloved, taken care of, and he had destroyed that wish every single time. He had to cry, and desperately hammered his head against the wall. I hate you, I hate all of you. Mother and father, Lois and Luther and Lois, God and Mary, you were never there for me. I hate you, go to hell, all of you. He sobbed loudly, his body disobeyed his orders, and he collapsed. His heartbeat was racing so fast and irregular that his ribcage vibrated hurtfully. The stabbing pain in his chest got worse, and the blurry sight turned into a white fog as he looked at his dead parents. His body calmed down, his limbs stopped thrashing around. You were barely able to hear his voice now, and his eyesight made way for the white fog to take over, so he was forced to close his eyes. I'm hungry for life. It was so dark and cold. However, the cold was not disturbing, but felt good. His body was heavy and frigid. When he opened his eyes again, it seemed like a dream, and Freddy looked up with relaxed expression. A scarf was covering his face, and he stripped it from his head. The boy turned his head around and saw people lying on camp beds, yet he wasn't sure because of his blurry eyesight. He turned his head back and slowly got up vampire style. He looked at his hands and flipped and smiling. They were pure white and absolutely wonderful. Even his arms, legs, everything had this amazing colour, and he was pleased by this. He threw the blanket that was covering his torso away and sat on the edge of the steel table. On top of the table next to him lay a notebook. Vaguely, he caught sight of a face in front. He took it, but he couldn't distinguish much. So he looked around the room. On a huge steel desk in the middle of the room, he found a pair of round glasses. He put them on and shot a second glance at the book. Frederick Neil Thompson. He read without any clue. In the photograph, he was laying on the top of one of the tables. A blanket was covering most parts except his face and closed eyes. He looked so lifeless. Freddy clutched his chest. His heavy heartbeat he always had, it was gone. Quiet, entirely. He sat on the chair and flicked through the notebook. 5th of December 2003. Patient suffers from heart disease and displays symptoms of cannibalism in a great extent. In so doing, is for one a matter of fear. The killed enemy has to be stored in the safest imaginable place in oneself to prevent its return. The other reason is the sentence of the victim by eating it and drinking its blood. Has a scar on the left side of his face, slender stature, nearly blind, and sanded teeth. Current state of mind unknown. Family Catholic. Biological parents Gary and Claire Thompson, murdered by Frederick N. Thompson, 1st of December 2003. Foster parents Luther and Lois Parrish, murdered by Frederick N. Thompson, 16th January 2000. Personal data. Name Frederick Neil Thompson. Born 17th of September 1986, Aberdeen, Great Britain. Died 1st of December 2003, Aberdeen, Great Britain, cardiac failure. He put the notebook back without a word. He looked to the door and saw light coming through a small crack. He sugarly walked there. Freddy then realised he was in a very dark cellar, and the smell of cold and death inside his nose just wouldn't disappear. A long staircase led to the light, and as he looked around, he noticed he was in a hospital. The white colour ran over him like a splash of cold water. He smiled. Freddy walked past a row of mirrors opposite the windows. He stopped and looked at his reflection. He took off his glasses. His vision was nearly completely white and blurry. He put the glasses back on his nose, and everything was keen again. He couldn't stop but smile and examine himself. Freddy loved his appearance. He was plain white, Snow White. Suddenly voices brought the boy back, and he looked up another staircase from where the voices came. It were many, and he saw people run and shove wheelchairs. He followed them. The place was clean and bright, which attracted Freddy's attention. Yes, here he felt very well. And now he felt the feeling inside his tummy. Hunger. A big board displayed the time and date. 11:03 a.m. 25th of May 2005. A chuckle left his lips as he walked through the crowd. His smile wide and radiant with luck. I think he liked was here his favourite colour. He would die for many people. However, he was unaware of the fact that actually everything he ever wanted was inside the hospital. In a small hallway, he found a sign showing the way to orthopedics, and on the other side, a young woman was standing. She wasn't smaller or taller than the others, but she caught Freddy's eyes more than the other woman. She had beautiful brown hair, and her blue eyes looked so familiar. He approached her faster and opened his eyes wide. She was so gorgeous, and she seemed surreal, and even the familiarity, he didn't know where from. All Freddy knew was that he loved and longed for her. She looked kind of startled as Freddy kneeled before her. He wasn't able to avert his gaze from her beautiful face. Kneel? She slowly asked, but Freddy didn't remember that once he held this name. Yet he nodded and stood up. "Do you remember me?" he asked her, with a bright smile. But that didn't last long. It disappeared when he saw her curved belly. She carried a baby under her heart. It was ridiculous, but she was the only woman in his life, the one he would die for, and she was expecting a child. Anger, sadness and despair and many other feelings overcame him. He forced a smile, and a single tear dropped down his pale cheek. I love you," he whispered. Freddy took her arm and snatched her into a hug, and he kissed her eagerly. She tried to fight back, but Freddy's clutch was strong, and the more she struggled, the deeper he kissed her. He felt so much love, hate, anger and hunger. The kiss turned more and more into biting, and the blood started to drip on the ground. He sobbed quietly, yet he smiled. He wasn't able to stop, and he bit into her lips and then went over to her face. Her desperate screams broke off and she collapsed. The people, patients and doctors panicked, but Freddy couldn't avert his eyes. Sarah lay on the ground, almost defilled entirely. Her pregnant belly disappeared. "I love you. I'll take care of you. I love and protect you till death do us part." He held Sarah's newborn in his arms. It was a girl, smeared in blood, crying desperately. Freddy examined her and smiled. "Sarah, and I will watch over you. We will take care of you. We, Sarah, her parents, my parents, are all united within me, and we will love you, my dear." He rose up and held her firmly in his arms and smiled at her, his little niece. "I'm not crazy, just hungry." And that is the end of the Freddy Butcher CreepyPasta. So I hope you all enjoyed. I am sorry that there's some stuff in pauses. It's because I think being translated, there was one or two bits that didn't quite make sense, so I was trying to reword it as I was reading it to try and make it make sense. But yeah, I would recommend reading it fully for yourself. I'll leave a link in the description. I did enjoy that one, but I think just because it was translated, there was one or two little bits that I found a little bit confusing, but I think the overall story was a really interesting one. He's really well done, and I think it was good how it showed him declining mental health wise, and when he was tricked into eating his family in that big kettle thing. But yeah, and it was quite a cool ending, and a bit surreal, and I like the fact that they mentioned his parents at the start and they brought it in. I mean, unfortunate for them that it was when, you know, they was getting eaten, but apart from that, I did enjoy it though, to be fair. It's just a little bit of a shame. I think it was just for the translation side of things, but that being said, I did really enjoy it. But I hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, feel free to like and subscribe, it really helps me out. And if you have any suggestions for any future videos you'd like me to cover on my channel, be that creepypasta, be that just random ones, just let me know. I'll link my socials in the description below. My email is in my YouTube bio, or just leave a comment. You know, I check all on the regular, so let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you all in the next one.